How do you feel like that culture is different between because you used to wrestle at Missouri, and obviously like being around wrestling culture, it's a lot different than the culture in MMA. How much do you have like a preference on which one you like better? Or
I loved wrestling more, honestly, when it comes to, I mean, maybe it was just, I mean, I'm 38 years old now. I've been fighting for 16 years. Back then I was from 18 to 22, right? So it was a completely different time of my life. I was young, I was single, no kids, no wife, nothing besides the wrestling room and going to class, right? But I still loved those times. I am who I am because of those 5 years I spent within the walls of the Hearn Center in Columbia, Missouri, under the tutelage of Brian Smith. But since I've started the sport of mixed martial arts, I always wanted to try to be at a gym that is as close to a wrestling program as possible. That's why I'm here in Florida. I mean, we have our coaches. We have a very tight-knit group of guys where we've got new guys coming in if they get invited, but also you're expected to be at practice, or you're not going to necessarily be cut from the team like how it was at Penn State or Mizzou. Like dudes don't show up, like you're done. You're going to get kicked out. It's not as much like that, but it is kind of like, hey, we are a team, and this is where we do you do your strength and conditioning with this guy, you do your striking with these coaches, you do your grappling here, you do your sparring here, and you're not allowed to just kind of come in and spar with us but then go around the city and do whatever you want. We are a team, and you get that camaraderie aspect that's very similar to college wrestling, but nothing will ever be able to recreate what the magic of what college wrestling was. But it's nice to be able to make a living and do what I do now.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about college wrestling. I'm a fellow walk-on.
There you go.
Preferred walk-on, I guess they called me. I don't know what that means. It means that
it means like, hey, we don't really care about you. We care about you a little bit more than this other guy we don't care about.
They're like, we'll cover your textbooks. I'm like, that's great. But do you still feel like I'm not as removed, graduated in 2019. Do you still feel a part of that walk-on mentality now? I know you still rep it a lot, but you've had a tremendous amount of success in fighting. So do you still feel like part of you has to prove something to yourself, if not others, relative to what you're doing now?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think there's no way, and everybody's got their different stories and their different paths, right? Like I came into Mizzou with a class of 16 guys or so, right? And maybe 14 of them were like, maybe 7 of them were state champs and blue chip recruits, right? And then another 7 were kind of middle of the roads, and then there was like 2 of us walk-ons, right? There was a couple guys that were 4-time state champs and blue chip recruits and were on full rides, and they did all the work, and they showed up and they worked just as hard as me. A guy like Raymond Jordan, right? He was my roommate, best friend in college, lived with me for 4 years. Like, he did the work. He was the guy that he and I had the same mentality, yet he was a blue chip recruit and I was a nobody walk on. But everybody's got their different paths, but I do believe that my path was perfect for me and my mentality and how I view competition. I do think it's held me back at times. I do think sometimes the stories and the lies that we've told ourselves of the past of me walking into Mizzou and thinking I'm less than all these guys, that guy's still inside of me, and I've had to continue to cultivate a belief in myself to realize, hey, yes, I know you started as a walk-on in 2009 at Mizzou, but now you're a guy who has put the work in for not just a couple of years, but a decade and a half, and you've done all the right things, so now you are the blue chip guy. It's okay to have massive amounts of success, but I think that story of the walk-on is just, it resonates with the masses. It resonates with the everyday Joe. It resonates with the people who have been knocked down and have had to pull themselves back up, because you don't follow people because of the virtual certainty of their success, but you follow people because of their failures as well. We love a comeback story. We love an underdog story. So that's kind of been my message since the very beginning. Yeah,
I like that you still kind of broadcast that, because people see you now or other people, and it's very hard to understand the story or resonate, like you're saying, at all. But to still rep that, like, hey, I walked on to a D1 university college wrestling team, and now here I'm at. It gives hope to others, and I try to do the same thing. It's like you don't have to be ultra talented or have success right off the bat to excel in whatever you're doing.
Yeah, and sometimes too, like especially in this day and age, in the social media digital age, the 15 minutes of fame, get rich quick age that we live in. Like people want things so quickly, right? You might be the right guy, but it might not be the right time. I know I was the right guy, but it wasn't the right time for me. I needed time. I was a late bloomer. I needed to have decades under my belt of hand-to-hand combat in order to get to be fashioned into the man that I am today, right? So we all have a different path, and patience is wildly undervalued, right? We say patience is a virtue, yet we don't have patience as a society, right? And even this process over the last year and a half, right? I was ridiculed by so many people for waiting for the fight and sitting out, when really sitting out and waiting was the best thing that could have happened to me. I came into the UFC and in 26 months had 6 training camps, four for performance of the night bonuses, fought for the title, fought all top 3 guys. Like, I love the sport and I love what I get to do, but it was a grind, and I needed a little beat to bounce, just kind of be a dad, a father, a husband, and a businessman and an entrepreneur, and not just beat up my body.